Why would God allow Job to suffer just to win a bet with Satan? That seems weird that God would just allow someone to suffer just so he can be proven right with Satan, the devil. So why would a good God punish Job in such a way just to win a bet with his opponent? Well, first we have to ask the question of, all right, what's happening in this story? Well, we see that Satan comes before God and says, "Listen, there's no one good on earth." And God says, "Have you considered my servant Job?" And Satan tries to make the excuse of, "Oh, well, he's only good because you haven't let me touch him in any way. You've given him this hedge of protection." And so God says, "Okay, I'll remove this hedge of protection. You can do basically anything to him except take his life. You can take away his family, his possessions, all of those things. Just do not take his life." And so Satan does this, and Job is, of course, distraught. He loses everything, and he's suffering immensely. And normally that's when we stop, and then we skip all the way to the end when, after Job ends his trial, God returns him. But we skip this huge chunk in the middle. And that huge chunk is really important for us to understand God's character, theology, and what's happening in this story. And so what we see as we go through this story, Job's friends come, and it's evident that Job's friends and Job himself subscribed to a theological view of what we would call retribution theology. And what retribution theology is, it's very similar to like karma. If I do something good, then I get good things. If I do something bad, then I get bad things. And Job thought of himself as righteous, and we see at the beginning of the book that he was rich. And so he thought, oh, I'm rich because I'm righteous. I'm rich because I've done all these things right in God's eyes. But that's really not the case. He's rich simply because God has blessed him. And so when everything gets taken away from Job, all of Job's friends are like, hey, just like you were rich because you were good, now that you're poor, now that you're suffering, now that you're hurting, there must be something in your life that has caused this. There must be something in your life that you've done that makes you deserving of this. And Job still believes this theology, but can't think of anything in his life that would cause this. He argues, no, I am righteous, I am pure, I have not done anything wrong. And then towards the end of this dialogue, we get a friend from Job come into the picture a little bit later, Elihu, and we see God as well come in. And God basically says, listen, all of you friends, you're wrong because you're arguing that there must have been something in Job's life that caused this. And that's not the case. Then God basically looks at Job and says, but Job, you're wrong too, because you think you're righteous and you're not. And really, so what we see is actually in this grand scheme of it all, it's not simply to win a bet, but God is actually allowing Job to suffer to teach him more about the character of God and the nature of theology and doctrine. And so we actually see that God uses this opportunity to teach Job the true meaning of good and bad. Things happening that are good in this world and things that are happening that are bad in this world. To teach Job that he is not righteous, that he is deserving of not just what he has experienced, but even far worse. But also reminding him that just because you suffer a little while on earth does not mean that you had one specific sin that led to these things. And that's what retribution theology taught, is that just because you sinned in this way, you will get equal punishment in this way. And that's what Job and his friends believed. So God took this opportunity to correct Job's misguided view of God himself. And so we see at the beginning, you'll notice God throughout this story doesn't reveal to Job that Satan ever came into the picture. And I think that's because while God allowed Satan to do these things, God ultimately was planning to use it to correct Job's theology and understanding of God and grace and the nature of himself and the nature of the gospel. And so we even see a similar thing with Joseph in the Old Testament. At the end of Genesis, Joseph looks at his brothers who had sold him into slavery, and he says, "For you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." And we see it in the same way in Job. Satan, the devil, meant evil for Job, meant evil for God, but God meant it for good. It wasn't simply to win a bet and prove to Satan that, hey, this person is great. You can't convince me otherwise. Look, we'll challenge him and play with him. No, it was God said, all right, you can do this to him, but I'm going to use it for my glory to correct Job's misguided views that he has. And so that's why God would allow Job to suffer. It wasn't simply to win a bet, but to increase his faith in God.